longtime leadership in support of human rights and the rule of law, and it's an honor to team up with him in introducing this resolution, which, as he indicated, is designed to expose the truth about a scheme that is threatening the constitutional rights of everybody who lives in the United States of America. Because as we speak, President Trump is paying American taxpayer dollars to the government of El Salvador, which has been a notorious violator of human rights. He's paying them American taxpayer dollars to lock up American residents without due process of law. The Constitution is clear. The Fifth Amendment, and by application to the states, the 14th Amendment, but the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution guarantees due process. And as Senator Kaine indicated, when President Trump was recently asked whether he had to comply with the Constitution of the United States, despite the fact that he put his hand on a Bible and took the oath of office right down the hall here not that long ago, the president's response was, "I don't know." That should concern every single member of the United States Senate, regardless of party. The principle of not depriving somebody of their liberty without due process of law is a fundamental core American value. That is why it's in the Constitution of the United States. This is not a liberal issue. It's not a conservative issue. It's not an issue that belongs to any one party. This is a fundamental American issue in the Constitution of the United States. And I know that Donald Trump wants to continue to change the subject when it comes to this matter, but the subject could not be more clear, and that is to protect the constitutional rights of people who reside in the United States. One person who was caught up in this unconstitutional scheme was Kilmar Garcia, who's a constituent of mine in Maryland, as are his wife, Jennifer, and their children. Federal agents illegally abducted Kilmar Garcia while he was driving with his 5-year-old son, who has autism. They took him to Baltimore, then Texas, and then they shackled him and handcuffed him and put him on a plane. He didn't know where he was going. And next thing he knows, he ends up in El Salvador at this notorious prison called CICOT, which is the gulag of Latin America. The Trump administration admitted in a federal court that they had wrongfully detained Mr. Abrego Garcia. They admitted it. They said it was an administrative error that landed him in CICOT. But what did they do? Instead of fixing that egregious error, they fired the lawyer who told the truth to the court. That's what they did. And since then, they have been ignoring the orders of the district court, the Fourth Circuit, and the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, in a 9-0 decision, we don't see many of those, in a 9-0 decision, ordered the Trump administration to facilitate the return of Mr. Abrego Garcia in accordance with his rights to due process. Now, if President Trump can ignore the courts, that's a very short road to tyranny. I have made very clear from the start that I'm not vouching for the man, Mr. Abrego Garcia. I am vouching for his rights, because if you deny his rights, you put in jeopardy the rights of everybody who resides in the United States of America. So that's why I did travel to El Salvador, both to meet with Kilmar Abrego Garcia, to try to find out whether he was dead or alive, report back to his family, but also to ask the government of El Salvador to stop being complicit in this scheme with President Trump to deny residents of the United States their constitutional rights. And when I met with the vice president of El Salvador, my worst fears were reinforced. Because I asked the vice president of El Salvador, why are you holding Mr. Abrego Garcia? Do you have any sort of criminal complaint against him? No, not at all. Why? Because the United States government, the Trump administration, is paying us to do so. That's why. I ultimately got to see Mr. Abrego Garcia. At first, I was stonewalled by the government of El Salvador. And he has been totally unable to contact anybody in the outside world. Before I met with him and since. He's in not only a total news blackout, but nobody can call him. Not his lawyers, not his wife, not his mother, not his brother. That is a violation of international law. And that's one of the hallmarks of this El Salvadorian gulag, is people go into CICAD or these other prisons, and you never hear from them again. The State Department 2023 Human Rights Report on El Salvador, the most recent one we have, reported credible reports of cruel, inhuman, or degrading torture in El Salvadorian prisons, including beatings with batons and rifles, overcrowding, underfeeding, and life-threatening medical neglect. Reports that guards fire stun guns on wet floors to deliver electric shock to the entire cell at once. That's where we're sending people like Abrego Garcia without any due process of law. And that is why it's so important that we adopt this resolution, which Senator Kaine has so well described. And I would urge my Republican colleagues to stand back and think of the moment we're in. Because not only did the President of the United States say he wasn't sure if he had to comply with the Constitution of the United States, which should set off alarm bells all over the country, regardless of party. But Steve Miller, one of his top policy advisors, publicly talked about suspending habeas corpus, suspending the Constitution of the United States. Mr. President, that is a very dangerous idea. And all of us, regardless of party, should stand up to protect the Constitution, to protect due process, and to make it clear that the President of the United States cannot ignore a 9-0 Supreme Court order, which he is doing as we speak. Because if he can do it with one person, or do it to two people, he can do it to anybody in the United States of America. And that is un-American. And I yield back.
Mr. President.
The senator from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I first want to begin by thanking my colleague, Senator Kaine,